Still in my 20s, I believed I was forging my future as an honest cop, someone who might actually make a difference. But in the span of a single shift, the world shattered. Everything changed in ways I still can't process. Maybe I never will. It all started at exactly 8 p.m. as I slid into the passenger seat of Sergeant Parker's cruiser. The overhead light buzzed softly, revealing dog-eared maps, a can of half-finished energy drink, and a battered first aid kit. Parker flicked me a smile, his usual stoic kindness shining behind tired eyes. He'd been on shift all day, but volunteered to show me the ropes after hours. I was anxious, trying hard not to show it. "Are you ready, kid?" He asked for what promised to be a normal night of minor disturbances, speeding tickets, and perhaps a domestic call or two. In hindsight, it's bizarre how quickly the mundane can transform into the catastrophic. We pulled out of the precinct's parking lot, the radio droning about a few traffic collisions, a missing teenager, and a possible burglary in progress. Just standard stuff. My chest buzzed with a mix of excitement and nerves. This was my chance to prove that I had what it took. My chance to show Parker, and myself, that I wouldn't freeze at the first sign of real conflict. The reality of policing, especially in a mid-sized city, isn't all about high-speed pursuits or shootouts in alleyways. Plenty of it is chatting with business owners, responding to drunken disputes at local bars, writing accident reports. I expected that. Part of me even welcomed the boredom, because I'd been told that routine nights made for fewer tragedies, fewer reasons to witness the city's darkest sides. But around 9:13 p.m., we received a call about a home invasion. The dispatcher's voice crackled with static, but there was an odd tremor beneath each word, like she was trying not to panic. Maybe we both should have heard the warning in her voice, but we didn't. Instead, we turned on our siren, sped through a couple of intersections, and arrived at a single-story house with a battered front door. The porch light swung in the breeze, casting long shadows that seemed to reach for us like bony hands. Broken wood scattered across the welcome mat. Parker parked across the street, the engine rumbling. We stepped out, each taking a breath to steady ourselves. I flipped on the flashlight from my belt, shining it on the door to reveal deep gouges in the wood, far bigger than typical pry bar marks. Parker exchanged a look with me. "Could be they used a crowbar," he murmured. "Or they kicked it in hard." I nodded, sweat already collecting under my vest. We approached, weapons holstered but hands hovering near them. Basic procedure. You never know what you might walk into with a home invasion. Inside, the living room was lit by a single lamp, knocked over on the floor. A metallic tang met my nostrils. It was clearly blood. Alarm flashed in Parker's eyes. "Is anyone here?" he called, stepping over broken picture frames. "Police, make yourself known." No answer, just a muffled sound from deeper within the house, like someone sobbing or choking. My pulse throbbed in my ears as we moved forward. Parker gestured for me to cover the hallway while he checked a side room. The sobbing grew louder, accompanied by a bizarre, wet chewing sound. I rounded a corner and nearly gagged at the scene. A man kneeling over a lifeless body, teeth clamped onto raw flesh. He jerked his head up at the beam of my flashlight, and I saw glazed, milky eyes set in a blood-soaked face. My mind registered the image in disjointed pieces. The dead eyes, the ropey saliva and gore hanging from his chin, the shredded remains of someone's torso. Before I could react, Parker called out, "Hey, get up immediately." Hands where I can see them. The man remained crouched, twitching, almost vibrating with frantic energy. Then with an inhuman snarl, he leapt. "Stay back," Parker shouted. "This is your last warning." The man, no, this thing didn't even flinch. He lunged with incredible speed. Parker squeezed off a shot. It caught the creature in the shoulder, knocking it sideways but not slowing it down nearly enough. The living corpse sprang forward and in the lunge, sank its teeth into Parker's forearm. I'll never forget Parker's scream. High-pitched, terrified, primal. The flashlight shook in my hand. I reached for my sidearm, heart pounding so loudly I couldn't hear my own thoughts. Another shot rang out as my bullet fired in panic. It hit the intruder's temple. The man dropped, like a puppet whose strings had been cut. For a horrifying second, I thought about the floor, the blood, the body that wasn't just a body. I thought about Parker's arm, now streaming blood from deep tooth marks. But what burned itself deepest into my psyche was the fleeting realization. He didn't go down from the chest shot. Only the headshot. Everything else was just a blur of motion and terror. Parker, gasping and wincing in pain, clutched his wounded arm. "That bastard bit me," he hissed, voice trembling. I scrambled for the first aid kit at my belt, wrapping gauze around the wound. The flesh was already turning purple, swelling and reeking of infection. I urged Parker to stay calm, even though my own mind was far from it. It didn't feel like a normal assault. It felt like we just stepped into a nightmare. Some calls come in waves. Soon after we made the distress call for medical backup, the radio exploded with chatter. Reports of people acting erratically, violently, and even biting. Police frequencies cluttered with pleas for backup at scenes that sounded more like war zones than typical city incidents. We never got that ambulance. Through static and shrill interference, we heard the dispatcher stammering something about first responders being attacked, paramedics refusing certain calls, entire neighborhoods erupting in chaos. The city was unraveling. And I had Parker sitting on the sidewalk outside that ransacked house, sweat plastering his hair to his forehead. His breathing had grown uneven, ragged. The improvised bandage I'd wrapped was soaked through with blood and some dark, foul-smelling fluid. "We gotta get you to the hospital, Sarge," I said, voice shaking. "This is bad." Parker nodded but seemed distant. His eyes seemed unfocused, face pale. I guided him into the cruiser, the interior light revealing just how much color he'd lost in a matter of minutes. My training told me that infection from a bite could be severe. My common sense screamed that something far worse was happening inside his body. We tore off toward County General, with the siren shrieking through empty streets. Except they weren't empty. Shapes stumbled across intersections, limping and shuffling as if in a daze. Some of them turned toward our car, arms outstretched, eyes reflecting the red and blue strobes. I had never seen that many crazies on any given night. This wasn't normal drunkenness or drug-induced mania. This was something else, something more. My foot pressed the accelerator harder. Near the hospital, barricades blocked the road. A single city patrol car sat with hazard lights flashing. It was a knee of our own. My heart soared, thinking maybe I could hand Parker off to paramedics, maybe get him real help. But as I slowed, illuminating the scene with our headlights, my stomach twisted. The barricade was in splinters, and the cop car door hung open. No sign of the officer. Just red streaks glistening on the concrete. It was blood. A lot of blood. Parker's head lolled against the passenger window. Sweat dribbled down his chin, his mouth parted in shallow breaths. He muttered something I couldn't catch. His voice sounded garbled. I reached over. "Hang in there, Parker." He snapped his head around to face me. His pupils had ballooned, almost swallowing the pale irises. For a fleeting second, I wondered if he recognized me. Then he spoke, but it was more of a slurred rasp, something that might have once been my name. He coughed violently. Thick, blackish gunk splattered across his seat and the dashboard. The stench was nauseating. I slammed the brakes. "Sarge, talk to me." His body convulsed back arching. He gripped my arm so hard it felt like bones might snap. I tried to pull away, but his grip was iron. He opened his mouth, lips pulled back in a silent snarl, eyes blank with something akin to hunger. My mentor, my teacher, a man who'd served the force honorably for decades, was disappearing before my eyes. We locked gazes as suddenly he growled. I was about to unholster my weapon, not wanting to believe I'd need it on him. Before I could move, Parker's strength diminished and he collapsed, unconscious. I frantically checked for a pulse. It was faint but there. A heavy silence settled inside the cruiser. A tear slid down my cheek. I didn't have time for that. Steeling myself, I put the car in drive again. If the road to the hospital was blocked, I'd cut through side streets or maybe head to a smaller clinic. There had to be someone who could help Parker. I turned onto a narrow road lined with grocery stores and a few cheap motels. That's when I saw the crowd. They filled the street, maybe 24 bodies. The closer I got, the more details emerged. Twisted limbs, blood-stained clothes, vacant or rage-filled eyes. The siren seemed to agitate them, and in unison they stumbled, then sprinted toward the cruiser like a pack responding to a dinner bell. No, 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 I muttered, flicking off the siren. Too late, they were already converging. Some hammered on the hood, others tore at the rear doors, smearing the windows with gore. A woman with half her face missing slung herself onto the windshield. My world became a tangle of outstretched hands and gnashing teeth. The noise was deafening. I reversed hard, tires squealing. Bodies thumped under the rear bumper. Parker slumped, half-conscious, moaning. My mind raced. If they broke through the glass, we'd be done for. Then from behind, another wave lurched out of an alley, blocking me in. The only path was forward, right back through that horrifying horde. I swallowed, feeling bile rise in my throat, and floored it. Impact after impact, the cruiser careened through them, metal striking bone. They clawed at the windows, clinging to the side mirrors. Something cracked in the windshield. Blood smeared, half-blinding me. I wrenched the wheel, forcing the car into a squealing left turn onto a larger street. The last of them fell away as the cruiser gained speed. My breathing came in ragged gasps, heart drumming at warp speed. I was supposed to be the calm one, the budding officer who kept his head. But nothing I'd learned in training prepared me for a street full of cannibalistic nightmares. With Parker losing consciousness, with the city unraveling outside, I felt terrifyingly alone. It took nearly 15 minutes of frantic driving, swerving around abandoned cars, random clusters of shambling infected people, and unidentifiable obstacles, before I spotted something resembling safety. A police station, just a small building used for community outreach and part-time desk work. I'd visited it once during training. It had barred windows and a sturdy steel door. Maybe, just maybe, it would offer us a refuge. I pulled up to find the front windows smashed. My chest tightened. Still, maybe something inside could help Parker. I needed more gauze, antibiotics, hell, even a quiet place to breathe. I cut the engine and nudged Parker. His eyes fluttered open, but they were still distant, unfocused. A line of black drool trickled from his mouth. "Hang on, Sarge," I whispered, hoisting his arm over my shoulder. We stumbled to the station's door, finding it kicked off its hinges. Broken glass and scattered files littered the floor. The overhead fluorescence flickered, giving the space a strobe effect that made my head swim. "Sarge, stay with me." I half-dragged him into a back office, avoiding the front windows. He mumbled unintelligibly, his nails scratching at my sleeve. My brain warred between wanting to comfort him and wanting to keep my distance in case. No, I didn't want to think about that. In the office, I found a stash of basic medical supplies in a locked cabinet. I jimmied it open, a flicker of relief surging through me. Gauze, disinfectant wipes, a few bandages. Nothing miraculous, but better than nothing. While I cleaned Parker's wound, he let out a low groan, almost a growl, fingers flexing. The smell from the bite was worse than rotting garbage. Pus and black veins creeping along his skin. Whatever was happening, it was spreading inside him like wildfire. "Sarge, can you hear me?" I asked, fighting to keep the tremor out of my voice. He locked eyes on me. For a moment, I thought I saw recognition, the faint spark of who he used to be. Then he blinked and it was gone, replaced by a hollow blankness that chilled me to the marrow. He let out a hiss, and for one horrifying second, I thought he'd try to bite me. But he just slumped, body sliding sideways onto the dusty floor. Something thumped in the hallway. My entire body tensed. Carefully, I eased the door shut, flicking off the overhead light to reduce our visibility. I pressed my ear against the wood. Another thump, closer this time. Shallow breathing that wasn't mine, a dragging sound, like someone limping with a twisted ankle. In my mind's eye, I pictured one of them stumbling through the station, sniffing out fresh meat. I glanced at Parker, lying motionless except for the sporadic twitch of his fingers. If the thing out there found us, I'd have to fight. But I was running on panic and adrenaline. Could I do it quietly? Could I do it at all if it came down to killing one of my own who turned? The door rattled. First there was silence, then a gentle push. My gun was in my hand before I registered drawing it. Slowly, the handle started to turn. I backed up, preparing to face whatever came through. My heart hammered, sweat slick under my vest. The door opened an inch. I saw fingers, clearly belonging to a human. Then a face appeared in the gap, dirty but alive, eyes wide with terror rather than blank hunger. "Don't shoot," the woman whispered. "I'm not one of them." I exhaled in relief, though my gun remained aimed. She slipped inside and eased the door shut behind her. Mid-30s maybe, hair plastered to her forehead with sweat, a nasty bruise on her cheek. Her clothes were stained with grime and spattered blood. "My name's Abby," she said softly. "Are you alone?" I gestured at Parker. "He's been bitten." "I'm trying to help him." Sympathy flickered in her eyes. "I'm sorry, I've seen half a dozen folks get bit tonight. None of them made it. Or, well, they made it but not the way we'd want." She told me she'd been hiding since the first outbreak calls jammed the airwaves. She'd holed up here after the building was broken into, hoping someone would rescue her. But rescue wasn't coming. Not anytime soon. The city was descending into anarchy. Her eyes darted to Parker's limp form. "He looks bad," I nodded, throat tight. "We have to try the hospital again once we find a safer route." Abby's face set in grim determination. Hospital was already overrun an hour ago. Everyone's heading to the outskirts or just trying to survive the night. The radio's been talking about some sort of evacuation plan near the stadium. "That might be your only shot." She paused as if weighing how much truth to give me. "But it won't matter if she lowered her voice. "If he turns on us." I didn't want to hear that. Couldn't face it. "He's not gone yet," I insisted. For a while, we barricaded ourselves in that back office. Abby found some stale energy bars and bottles of water in a desk drawer, rationing them out. The phone lines were dead. The station's radio in the front area only spewed static. Outside, the city's unholy symphony continued, distant screams, gunshots, sickening wails that belonged to no normal creatures. With no windows in the back room, I had no idea how widespread the chaos was, but I felt it closing in. Time crawled as my watch read 11:47 p.m. The station was eerily quiet, the flickering fluorescent in the hallway strobing on and off. I glance at Parker, see the shadow of his chest rising and falling, each time grateful he was still, well, here. But for how long? Something inside me clung to the hope that he might pull through, if we got him to real medical care. That hope was the only thing keeping me from losing it completely. Then Parker's breathing changed. It grew shallow, raspy. I rushed to his side. "Sergeant," I whispered, gently gripping his shoulder. He mumbled, eyes rolling under half-closed lids. "Come on, buddy, just hold on." Abby hovered near the door, arms folded, her expression torn between pity and urgency. "We need to move soon," she hissed. "If we want any chance." I started to protest but froze. Parker's convulsions resumed, shivering turned to full-body spasms. He gagged, blackish bile leaking from his mouth. I reflexively backed away. He pitched onto his side, moaning in agony. His nails raked the floor, leaving scratch marks. Then he went still. No breath and no movement. My heart lurched. "No, Parker, please." I dropped to my knees beside him, pressing my fingers to his neck for a pulse. There was no pulse. The word pounded in my skull, overshadowing the monstrous reality of what might come next. I squeezed my eyes shut, tears threatening. "Sarge, damn it, no." Silence hung thick and grim. Abby approached, placing a hand on my shoulder. "I'm sorry," she began, her voice low. "But we have to be sure he's gone for good." I knew what she meant. Put a bullet in his head. End it before he rose. The moral revulsion tore through me. He was my mentor, my friend. But beneath that protest, I felt the primal terror. Because I'd seen how these infected returned. I'd seen what they became. Parker wouldn't be Parker. He'd be a snapping, unholy mockery of the man he used to be. I swallowed hard, tears in my eyes as I reached for my gun. My hands trembled so violently, I thought I'd drop it. A part of me prayed he'd stay dead, that maybe this infection wouldn't reanimate him. Or maybe we'd have a small miracle. But hope was devoured by the memory of that first attacker. He'd been shot in the chest, didn't die until a bullet hit his brain. As I raised the weapon, Parker's body twitched. His eyes snapped open, filmy and empty. I gasped, stumbling back, gun pointing at his skull. But even in that moment, I couldn't pull the trigger. The hesitation might have cost me my life if Abby hadn't acted. She seized a metal baton from a desk and swung it down, aiming for Parker's temple. His hand shot up unnaturally fast, catching the baton mid-swing. With a guttural snarl, he yanked her forward, teeth snapping. I jumped in, tried to pry him loose, but he flailed, his strength terrifying. He threw me aside as if I weighed nothing. My head smacked against a filing cabinet. Stars blinked in my vision. Abby cried out, pinned beneath Parker's reanimated corpse, the baton clutched in his fist. She struggled, but he leaned in, jaws gnashing. I heard her scream, an unearthly shriek of terror as he twisted his face toward her neck. Finally, I steadied my shaking arms, took aim and fired. The muzzle flash lit the room. One bullet, straight into Parker's head. He collapsed onto Abby, body going limp in an instant. She shoved him off, chest heaving. My gun clattered to the floor as I knelt beside Parker's body. Hot tears streaked my cheeks. Abby was alive, panting, but her face glowed with shock. A few seconds slower, and he would have torn her throat out. I'm sorry, I whispered, voice cracking. It felt like I'd just murdered my friend, even though it wasn't him anymore, just the disease wearing his skin like a puppet. My throat tightened until I could barely breathe. Abby placed a trembling hand on my shoulder. You saved my life, she murmured. And you saved him from becoming fully that. She paused, searching for words. He was already gone. I shook numb. The weight of everything threatened to bury me. Parker's wide, dead eyes stared at the ceiling, the hole in his forehead still smoking. I swallowed the bitter truth. My first kill wasn't even a criminal. It was my mentor, consumed by this living nightmare. Then suddenly, a loud crash reverberated from the hallway, snapping us out of our grief. We jumped, adrenaline flaring. The noise repeated. Thump, thump, like something large hurling itself against walls. Time's up, Abby said, voice tense. We have to move. Her eyes flicked to Parker one last time. We can't stay here or we'll end up just like him. I pressed my trembling lips together, forced a final look at Parker's body, then nodded. The living outranked the dead in that moment. Even if it meant leaving behind the man who'd introduced me to law enforcement, who'd given me tips on dealing with city politics, who taught me to remain calm under pressure. The floor felt unsteady beneath my feet. Still, I rose. Abby handed me my sidearm. There were only a few bullets left in the magazine. Better make them count, she said, her gaze flickering with urgency. No guarantee we'll find more ammo. My breath caught in my throat as I said, right. We crept out of the back office, leaving Parker's still form behind. The hallway flicker light danced on the walls like mocking specters. Around a corner, we glimpsed a shape pounding at a locked door, raw fists leaving bloody smears. It spun at the sound of our footsteps, a civilian, presumably, but now sporting that same vacant hunger. As it charged, Abby shattered its skull with a single, savage baton strike. My stomach churned at the ease with which we ended another human life, of course, if these things could still be called human. But thinking too long about it threatened to break me. Reaching the front entrance, we stepped over more broken glass. Shadows shifted outside, shapes wandering. The scent of smoke drifted in from somewhere. Abby shot me a look of warning, then cracked the door open enough to peek through. The station's porch was deserted. We slipped out, hearts pounding. I took a last glance over my shoulder into the gloom. Goodbye, Sarge, I whispered. And then we disappeared into the night, leaving behind the only semblance of support I'd had. Sergeant Parker was gone, the city was in chaos, and it was only midnight. Abby led the way, baton in hand, eyes scanning every shadow. The city had become a graveyard. Power outages flickered entire blocks into darkness. Fires raged unchecked. Sirens wailed in the distance. We passed shattered storefronts, looted convenience stores, and an overturned bus with blood streaking its windows. The glow of scattered fires revealed silhouettes shambling through the roads. Occasionally, I spotted someone else, just like us, slinking between buildings, desperate to avoid the growing herds of infected. Abby explained that earlier, she'd heard rumors about a safe zone forming at the big stadium on the east side of town. Some said the National Guard was airlifting survivors. Others claimed it was a rumor started by looters to draw out easy targets. Nobody knew the truth. But we needed some plan. Any plan was better than nothing. "You see any other choice?" Abby asked softly. Her eyes revealed her own uncertainty. "You got a better idea?" "No," I admitted. "If there's even a chance people are there, we should try." Quiet enveloped us as we maneuvered through back alleys to avoid large groups. My thoughts churned with images I couldn't unsee. Parker's transformation, that savage attacker in the living room, the strangers we'd passed devouring others. Something monstrous was happening, spreading faster than any official response could contain. The city was falling. Maybe the world was too. We clung to the edges of buildings, using the flicker of street fires to see. At one point, we huddled behind a dumpster while a cluster of infected shuffled past, moaning as they sniffed the air. I held my breath until my lungs burned. Suddenly, I heard a crash near the corner of the alley. Abby and I tensed. Then a figure staggered into view, a teenage girl, hair matted with blood. She was alive, trembling, eyes darting around in abject terror. She spotted us and opened her mouth, but I pressed a finger to my lips, desperate for her not to scream. She limped closer, tears spilling down her cheeks, but before we could warn her to keep quiet, the hush was shattered by a feral shriek. 3 infected sprinted out of the shadows, tackling her. Abby lunged to intervene, but I pulled her back, biting down on my own horror. There were too many. We couldn't have saved the girl without sacrificing ourselves. She died with a final, piercing cry and we fled, hearts sick with guilt. To live in this madness, we had to choose survival over heroics, or so I told myself. Yet shame seared my insides. We pressed on in silence, the carnage we'd witnessed festering in our minds. We turned onto a quieter street, lined with small shops and offices. A faint wind carried the rank odor of decomposition. My eyes watered. Abby looked ready to retch. Then, from a small chapel across the street, we heard singing. Soft, discordant singing. We exchanged a wary glance. This city had become a nightmare, so any sign of normalcy or humanity felt suspect. Still, the singing continued, a gentle hymn drifting through the broken stained glass windows. Maybe survivors or maybe a trap. My conscience gnawed. "We should check," I whispered, though fear made my skin crawl. "If there are people," Abby hesitated. "All right," she conceded. But we go in ready. We approached the chapel's heavy wooden doors. One side lay ajar. A flickering candlelight glowed from within. I led the way, stepping over fractured glass scattered across the threshold. The singing grew clearer, but it had an eerie, almost unhinged quality. My flashlight beam revealed pews askew, some shattered, others stained with dark, dried fluids. At the front, near the altar, a single figure kneeled, rocking back and forth. A faint silhouette in the candlelight. As we moved closer, I noticed he wore tattered clerical robes, an older priest, maybe. He clutched a large wooden crucifix to his chest, softly crooning a hymn in Latin. When our footsteps echoed on the tile, his singing wavered. "Go away," he said, voice rasping. "I'm praying for their souls, Father," Abby tried gently. "We need to see if you're," he whirled around. His eyes were bloodshot, tears leaving streaks on his ashen face. "You can't save me, my child," he whispered. "They are everywhere. Demons in the streets, gnashing their teeth. Plagues of revelation." My heart twisted. He looked traumatized but not infected. I stepped forward cautiously. "Father, do you know if there are more survivors? We're trying to find a safe route to the stadium." He gazed at me, seeming to see through me. Then he shook his head, eyes unfocusing. "Stadium. That's where my parishioners went, you see. They all fled. Some turned on each other, right there in the pews. Biting and ripping," he shuddered. I locked myself in the rectory, praying for salvation. God didn't answer. A bitter laugh escaped his throat. "They are out there. And in here too." I noticed his trembling left hand, hidden partially behind his robes. With a chill, I realized he was clutching a gaping wound on his side. My eyes flicked to Abby. She noticed it too. It's only a matter of time, the priest said softly. I keep singing, hoping maybe he'll hear me. Tears gleamed in his eyes. But I can feel the corruption creeping. My vision's fading. He lifted his crucifix, pressing it to his lips, stifling a sob. Every moral fiber in me told me to do something, treat the wound, help him. But I remembered Parker's fate, how rapidly the virus, if that's what it was, took hold. The man was doomed. Abby stepped back, face pale. We should go, she whispered, voice thick with sorrow. He's going to turn. I felt a sickening sense of déjà vu. Was it kinder to end him now, or let him have his final moments of prayer? I opened my mouth to speak, but the priest raised a trembling hand. Go, he pleaded. Don't watch me die. Then he broke into that unhinged hymn again, the words echoing in the chapel's emptiness. We retreated, hearts pounding. Outside, the wind had picked up, carrying distant screams like wailing ghosts. We hurried away from the chapel. After a block, a single muffled gunshot rang out. I flinched as Abby halted, tears in her eyes. We both knew what that likely meant. We didn't speak of it further. The hours between midnight and dawn blurred. Fear does that. Time warps in life-or-death circumstances, turning each minute into either a frantic scramble or a stretch of tense dread. We navigated the labyrinth of city streets, constantly alert for the infected who roamed in small packs or sometimes moved in larger hordes, driven by a predatory instinct that defied rational explanation. More and more, we saw random fires licking at the night sky, evidence that people had tried to fight back or simply destroyed everything in despair. At one intersection, we found 2 police officers pinned down behind a crashed patrol car, exchanging wild gunfire with a throng of infected. They caught sight of us, waved frantically for assistance. Abby and I glanced at each other. An unspoken conversation passed between us. Could we even help? I counted at least 15 infected. The officers shooting was sporadic, panicked. They were pinned. If we joined, we'd likely get ourselves killed, or worse, bitten. My hand tightened around my gun, remembering Parker's face. We slipped away, hearts heavy with guilt. Their screams followed us down the block. We saw unthinkable horrors, victims torn apart in doorways, bodies strewn in the streets. But we also encountered pockets of living humans, looters who had seized the crisis as an opportunity, forming vicious gangs. Near a shuttered electronics store, a half-dozen men brandishing shotguns and makeshift blades confronted us. Their eyes flicked with fear and opportunism. One of them, a stocky guy with a shaved head, sneered. Any supplies or weapons? Hand them over. We ain't looking to share. They flanked us, forming a loose circle, ignoring the looming threat of the infected howling somewhere in the distance. Abby and I had no desire for a fight we couldn't win. Slowly, we raised our hands, but we had almost nothing to offer. My sidearm was down to precious few bullets, and Abby's baton wouldn't do them much good. Still, these men were jumpy, eyes darting to the shadows. We were an easy mark. A chilling shriek pierced the tension. The infected had found us. The men turned, cursing. In a flash, a half-dozen rotting figures sprang out from a side alley. One sank its teeth into the nearest looter's shoulder. He screamed as the others opened fire erratically. Bullets sprayed, with one shattering the store window and another clipping an infected in the jaw. Abby and I ducked behind a fallen street lamp, avoiding crossfire. In the chaos, we seized our chance. Abby dashed across the street while I fired 2 shots at an advancing infected, hitting it in the head. My stomach twisted as I realized I was down to maybe 4 bullets total. But the immediate threat was neutralized, and the looters were too busy fending off the rest of the swarm to bother with us. We ran until our lungs burned, weaving around crushed cars and debris. Even as the looters' screams echoed behind us, part of me felt relief. The infected had unknowingly saved us from a dangerous robbery, an odd, sick twist in the lawlessness of that night. Eventually, we found temporary refuge in a small grocery store. Its glass doors had been shattered, aisles ravaged by looters. The smell of spilled beer and rotting produce filled the air. We rummaged for anything that could help: water bottles, a few cans of soup, a jar of peanut butter. No fresh stuff left, of course, Power outages had likely ruined the perishables. But at least we had enough to keep moving. We took turns keeping watch near a boarded window. The city outside was a nightmare carnival, with screams, flickering fires, running footsteps. But the infected themselves, they were horrifyingly patient when no loud noises drew them in. They'd drift, skulking through the streets, heads cocked like predators waiting to pounce on the next sign of life. Inside the store's walk-in freezer, we discovered a half-mad survivor, shivering, wrapped in a blanket. His teeth chattered. He mumbled nonsense about darkness swallowing everything. Abby tried to coax him to leave with us, but he refused, shaking his head. Maybe he believed the freezer walls would protect him. We couldn't force him to come, and we sure couldn't stay. So we left him there, locked in a personal hell. Neither Abby nor I spoke much. Our gazes said enough. We were terrified, exhausted, reeling from moral compromises at every turn. We couldn't save them all. Hell, we could barely save ourselves. Around 3:00 a.m., a radio broadcast crackled through on a dusty emergency transmitter we found near the cashier's counter. Static-laced, but still intelligible, this is the Emergency Operations Center. We have reason to believe a wide-scale outbreak of unknown origin, hostile infected individuals, major city collapse. Martial law is in effect, local stadium established as a possible evacuation point. Condition uncertain. If you can hear this, proceed with caution. The voice cut off, replaced by guttural static. My head sank into my hands. We have to try, I whispered, repeating what felt like a mantra. It's the only lead. Abby nodded, though her eyes brimmed with hopelessness. Yeah, we move or we die. By 4:30 a.m., a pale hint of light teased the horizon. Dawn threatened to break, but it felt more like a herald of destruction than hope. We'd heard repeated rumors, snippets from other survivors and from half-working radios, that the military planned to cleanse infected zones at first light. Firebombing, some doomsday solution. The rumor alone sent chills up my spine. If we didn't get clear, we'd be collateral damage. We're close to the stadium, Abby said, checking a battered city map by flashlight. 2 miles, maybe. We can make it in under an hour if we move now, but there was a problem. Between us and the stadium sprawled a congested highway that had been turned into an impromptu war zone. The infected roamed among the abandoned cars. Helicopter lights occasionally raked the area, and we heard sporadic gunfire that sounded military-grade. We faced a grim choice, either brave that highway or try a longer route that risked cutting it too close to dawn. If the rumors were true, we could be caught in a fiery extermination. Abby and I exchanged a tense look. We go through, I decided, swallowing my fear. Faster is better. We can weave between cars for cover. She nodded grimly, all right. We set off, picking our way around crashed vehicles and shattered barricades. Windshield glass crunched underfoot, each step echoing in my chest like a countdown to doomsday. The night was almost over, but it promised no relief, only new terrors in the daylight. Halfway down the on-ramp, we spotted them, a wall of infected, at least 24, patrolling near a cluster of wrecked ambulances. They seemed agitated, perhaps drawn by distant gunshots. We crouched behind an upturned SUV. A quick scan revealed a potential path. If we moved quietly among the stalled cars, we might slip by without drawing their attention. But the risk was immense. A single clumsy noise and the entire horde would descend on us. With only a handful of bullets, we wouldn't stand a chance. Sweat trickled down my brow. I nodded at Abby, and we began creeping forward. Every footstep was deliberate, a prayer that no glass shards would crunch too loudly, that no car alarm would unexpectedly blare. My heartbeat was so thunderous in my ears, I feared they'd hear that alone. We made it a third of the way. Then, from behind an overturned Jeep, a figure jumped up, an uninfected man, wide-eyed with fear. He aimed a shotgun at us. Back off, he hissed. These are my supplies. Abby and I froze, hands raised. Our eyes flicked to the shotgun, then to the horde. The man looked half-crazed, face smeared with grime and tears. He must have thought we were there to steal his stash. My eyes darted to a cooler beside him, bottles of water and some bandages, maybe. Not worth risking death. But he was too panicked to reason. Easy, I breathed, trying to keep my voice calm. We don't want your stuff. We're just passing through. He didn't lower the gun. His pupils were pinpricks of paranoia. Everybody wants something, he spat. I killed for this. I'm not giving it up. A wave of dread washed over me. If this confrontation escalated, gunfire would draw the infected. We'd all be dead or worse. Abby whispered, "Hey, we're leaving now, okay? We'll go around you. Just please." Her voice broke off as the man's finger tensed on the trigger. My adrenaline spiked. A standoff in the middle of this undead horror was insane. Yet the man's desperation was real. He'd probably seen more betrayal in one night than in his entire life. Behind me, the infected moans rose in pitch. Shadows shifted. Some of them had caught our scent or our voices. Their heads tilted, scanning. My throat went dry. Then it happened. The man fired a warning shot into the air. Boom, boom, boom. The noise thundered, echoing across the highway. Instantly, the entire horde whipped around toward us, shrieking. "No," Abby cried, grabbing my arm. "We have to run." In a heartbeat, the man realized his mistake. "Oh God," he screamed, fumbling to reload. The infected sprinted forward, a howling wave of rotting flesh. Their combined footsteps hammered on asphalt, their moans converging into a horrendous chorus. We bolted, weaving between cars, ignoring the man's anguished cries as the horde swarmed him. I glimpsed him firing wildly, then being dragged under. My stomach lurched, but survival instincts overrode compassion. A cluster of infected veered toward us. I fired my gun twice, taking down two. Abby smashed another's skull with the baton. Still, they kept coming. We zigzagged, trying to use wrecked cars as barriers. One infected lunged over a sedan, arms outstretched. Abby yelped, stumbling back, and I shot it in the forehead, my second-to-last bullet. We sprinted until my lungs burned, until the roar of moans faded behind us. I had no idea how many infected we'd outrun, or how many were still on our tail. But at last, we emerged onto a side street near the stadium's perimeter. It looked half-collapsed, the gates twisted. I spotted broken chain-link fences, a scattering of abandoned vehicles. A few floodlights flickered near an entrance ramp, revealing tall silhouettes of bleachers. No sign of soldiers or rescue squads. Abby sagged against a wall, panting. "Is this really it? Are we even safe here?" I wasn't sure. The place was ominously quiet. No gunfire, no lines of survivors, no organized military presence. There was only emptiness. My watch read 5:23 a.m. Dawn would break soon, and if the firebomb rumors were true, we had little time. Edging around the exterior, we found a torn banner reading Emergency Quarantine Zone. It fluttered, half hanging off a makeshift scaffolding. I tried to push down a surge of dread. If this had been a quarantine center, it was obviously overrun. Still, we might find a helicopter or a vantage point from the higher stands. Anything better than the open street. We snuck through a toppled chain-link gate into a wide concourse. Trash and debris littered the ground, discarded posters, bullet casings. The stench of death permeated everything. A guttural moan echoed. Abby tensed, baton raised. I slid the flashlight off, relying on faint emergency lights. The moan intensified. Then a single infected shuffled into view near a concession stand, back turned to us. It was a soldier, or had been, still wearing part of a tattered uniform. Its left arm hung by a few tendons, but it sniffed the air, obviously aware something living was near. Abby motioned for me to hold. She crept forward, a quiet predator. The baton struck the base of the infected skull with a wet crack, dropping it instantly. A small mercy, to kill it before it could shriek. We dragged the body aside to avoid detection. Pressing on, we passed through a broken corridor leading to the stadium's interior. Where the stands and field opened up before us, my heart sank. Instead of a thriving evacuation site, we saw a field of horror. The stadium had become a mass grave. Makeshift tents ripped apart, corpses strewn across astroturf, scattered supplies burning in small fires. So many had hoped to find refuge here, only to be slaughtered when the infection spread within these walls. Movement near the center drew our eyes, pockets of infected slowly pacing among the dead. They hadn't spotted us yet, but one loud noise and we'd be swarmed. Was this really the rumored safe zone? Abby sank to her knees, burying her face in her hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. We'd pinned our last hope on this place. It was gone, just another tomb in this devoured city. I looked around, desperate to find some silver lining. Above the press boxes at the far end, a helicopter pad was set up, likely for air evacuations. No helicopter now, just an empty platform. But maybe there was a radio or flares, or anything that could signal rescue if rescue still existed. I gently lifted Abby to her feet. There might be something we can use, I whispered, forcing optimism. Let's check the press box, she sniffed, eyes hollow, then nodded. Together, we skirted around the field's perimeter, weaving through tattered tents. My soul ached at the sight of children's toys, half-eaten rations, medical stretchers thick with congealed blood. Several times, we froze as infected ambled past, sniffing the air. But we managed to climb a service stairwell leading up to the press area without alerting them. The hallway at the top was dim, emergency lights flickering. Doors marked media access and authorized personnel only lined the corridor. In the corner, we found a security office with wide windows overlooking the stadium. Inside, monitors displayed static or half-dead feeds from cameras around the facility. One screen showed the stadium parking lot. More infected roamed there. Another screen showed an access tunnel where a handful of survivors, maybe 5 or 6, had barricaded themselves behind a chain-link door. They looked terrified, banging on the metal, possibly trying to escape from something chasing them. Then, my eyes landed on a functional radio unit. I nearly shouted in relief. We rushed over, scanning the controls. The frequency was set to an emergency channel. Static hissed, but a faint voice broke through every few seconds. Citywide incineration, dawn, minimal survivors, retreat to perimeter if you can hear. A wave of hopelessness sank in. If the citywide incineration, or firebombing, was real, we had minutes, maybe an hour, until flames consumed everything. But maybe we could still call for help. I grabbed the mic. Hello, is anyone there? We're at the stadium press box. Survivors need immediate evacuation. First, there was static. Then a garbled response. Hold position, negative on ground support, extraction, unknown. Repeat, we have multiple survivors, I lied, hoping to entice a rescue. We can hold out, but we need immediate pickup, the static hissed. Then, one inbound roof, can't guarantee, eat a 30 minutes. Good luck, my heart pounded. Copy that, I said, voice shaking. We'll be on the roof. The line went dead. No telling if we'd been heard clearly, or if they were just placating us. But the smallest ember of hope ignited in my chest. If a chopper was inbound, I had to believe we could meet it. Abby turned, scanning the room. We need to hurry. The roof is above the upper bleachers, right? Yeah, I said, recalling the layout from when I came here for a baseball game once. We can climb the maintenance ladder near the broadcast tower. She nodded. Let's go. But as we stepped into the hallway, a bone-chilling roar reverberated from below. Something big was clambering up the stairwell, heavy steps shaking the structure. My grip tightened on the gun. One bullet left. Fear coiled in my stomach. If it was a large group, we were screwed. Go, Abby hissed, nudging me to the next corridor. We ran, footsteps echoing in the gloom. Behind us, the beastly stomps grew closer. Then we heard glass shatter. A monstrous figure lurched into view around the corner, an infected soldier in riot gear, half its helmet missing, jaw unhinged. Dried blood crusted on the bulletproof vest. Its moan was deep, resonating with mindless rage. I raised my gun, lining up a headshot. I pulled the trigger, but it was empty. I'd forgotten I'd spent the last round when we escaped the highway. Shit, I fumbled to reload but realized I had no spare bullets left. Abby charged forward, baton raised, letting out a furious yell. She slammed it into the creature's face. It staggered, but the helmet plating deflected much of the impact. It swung its arm, knocking her aside like a rag doll. She hit the wall hard, crying out in pain. The creature advanced, gargled roar echoing. Thinking fast, I lunged for the soldier's sidearm, a pistol still holstered on its belt. With trembling hands, I tried to unclip it while the infected swung at me. One blow grazed my shoulder, sending me stumbling. It pinned me against a half-collapsed door, breath rancid through the battered helmet visor. Its teeth snapped inches from my face. Desperate, I rammed my elbow into its helmet, creating a hairline crack in the visor. The creature reeled back, hissing. I finally managed to yank the sidearm free, jamming it under the cracked visor. I squeezed the trigger. Blood and brain matter splattered the hallway as the bullet tore through. The monster's body convulsed, then collapsed with a crash of metal gear. My ears rang and my body shook. I stared at the newly acquired weapon, chest heaving. One bullet spent, uncertain how many remained. Abby scrambled to her feet, battered but alive. We had no time to dwell. More infected groans echoed from behind us. The corridor swarmed with the stench of them. We sprinted up another flight of stairs, ignoring the throbbing ache in our muscles. At the top, a maintenance ladder stretched up to a hatch. I shoved it open. Gray dawn light spilled in, revealing a small rooftop area adjacent to the stadium's towering floodlights. The horizon glowed with the sun's approach, or maybe with the reflection of flames. Either way, time was almost up. We emerged onto the roof. From this vantage point, the city spread out in a panorama of chaos, columns of smoke, flickering fires, the wail of sirens. Here and there, we saw infected staggering between buildings. The stadium below us was a sea of corpses with intermittent pockets of motion. Helicopters roamed the skyline in the distance, their searchlights glowing faintly in the dawn gloom. Abby and I stumbled to an open area of the roof, frantic eyes scanning the sky for any sign of the promised chopper. There was nothing yet. The radio on my belt crackled. Attention all survivors. Extreme prejudice cleansing will commence at dawn. Repeat, citywide incineration authorized. If you are still within city limits, proceed to an established safe zone or signal for extraction. This is your final warning, Abby cursed under her breath. My watch read 5:57 a.m. Sunrise was imminent. That dreaded cleansing, firebombing, or whatever nightmare approach they'd chosen, was about to begin. We had to believe that helicopter was coming, or else we'd be reduced to ash. Minutes ticked by. Each second felt like a year. A monstrous hush fell over the stadium beneath us, like even the infected sensed something cataclysmic was about to happen. We clung to the faint hope of rotor blades appearing above the swirling smoke. Then we heard it, a faint thump-thump-thump in the distance. My heart soared. Abby gripped my arm. We ran to the edge of the roof, waving our arms, screaming our lungs out, hoping the pilot would see us. The black dot drew closer, materializing into a military helicopter. A searchlight flickered across the stadium. My chest nearly exploded with relief. I fumbled for a flare from the soldier's belt we'd fought, but found none. Desperate, I fired 2 shots into the air from the stolen sidearm, muzzle flashes punching holes in the dawn sky. The helicopter veered our way. Abby let out a delirious laugh. They're coming. Suddenly, a thunderous blast cut her off. A wave of heat rolled across the rooftop, nearly knocking us down. On the far side of the city, a fireball erupted into the sky, a barrage of missiles raining from some distant artillery. The cleansing had begun. My stomach lurched in terror. Buildings toppled in the inferno, a chain reaction of explosions dancing along the horizon. The helicopter swooped above us. For a moment, it hovered, searchlight glaring in our eyes. I spotted a figure gesturing from an open hatch. They were going to lower a rope ladder. Abby turned to me, tears in her eyes. We made it. Another explosion. This one closer. The shockwave rattled my teeth. Flames belched into the air from behind the stadium. Concrete and steel trembled beneath us. The pilot tried to hold position, but the swirling smoke and debris battered the aircraft. I could see him fight to keep it steady. A loud whump struck the helicopter's side, maybe flying rubble. It careened, spinning, the rotor shrieking. The man at the hatch was thrown back inside, the rope ladder whipping across the roof. Abby lunged for it, desperate hands catching the rung. She dangled, eyes wide in horror. I raced forward to grab her. Another shockwave cracked the stadium's support beams. The roof buckled. Chunks of concrete soared through the air like artillery. The helicopter pitched sideways. The ladder ripped free of Abby's grip, and she fell hard onto the collapsing roof, rolling toward the edge. "Abby," I screamed, running to her side. The helicopter lost altitude, spinning away in a frantic attempt to gain control. My heart sank as I realized it was aborting, or maybe crashing. A deafening roar filled my senses. Flames licked the stadium seats below, and the entire structure began caving. "It's too late," Abby gasped, a grim acceptance in her eyes. "We can't stay here." "It's falling." I looked around wildly. The stadium burned, the city devoured by an onslaught of fire and infected. No rope ladder, no rescue. Another wave of explosions thundered. The sunrise was here. The cleansing was unstoppable. Abby and I scrambled away from the crumbling section, but the cracks in the concrete raced after us like living things. The roof pitched, and we tumbled to our knees. A dizzying drop loomed at the edge. Below, hordes of infected reeled as the stadium bleachers collapsed in upon them. Smoke choked us, and the heat was infernal. In the chaos, I spotted an emergency cable strung across a gap toward a partially intact scaffolding. A wild idea. Maybe we could shimmy across it, reach safer ground outside the stadium. Abby saw it too. She nodded, eyes blazing with adrenaline. Together, we scrambled to the cable, flames snapping at our heels. Abby gripped the cable first, swinging across the hellish void. Sparks rained from overhead lights tearing loose. She made it halfway when a chunk of debris slammed into the scaffolding on the far side. It wobbled precariously, threatening to break free from the stadium wall. Abby's eyes filled with terror. I yelled over the roar of flames. "Keep going," but the scaffolding collapsed, plunging downward. Abby dangled, suspended by the cable over a swirling pit of smoke and fire. I clutched the other end, pinned under a fallen girder. Panic seized me as the girder on my side started sliding, threatening to dump me into the inferno as well. "Help!" Abby's voice was raw with fear. I braced my feet against a half-collapsed section of roof, trying to wedge the girder. My muscles screamed. Another explosion rocked the stadium. Fire raged. I couldn't hold forever. Below us, the stands erupted in flames. The infected screeched, many immolated as they tried to climb walls. Concrete gave way in huge slabs. The cable whipped in the superheated air. Abby's terrified gaze locked on mine. I screamed her name. She struggled to climb, hands burning from friction. Without warning, the chunk of roof supporting the girder buckled. My makeshift anchor gave way. My side of the cable tore free, launching me forward. Abby shrieked as we slammed into each other midair, losing our grip. Gravity claimed us, and we plummeted into a cloud of black smoke. I hit something hard, twisted metal or maybe a broken walkway. My ribs exploded in pain, and my vision flickered. Abby's scream faded, swallowed by the roaring inferno. The stadium was collapsing all around us in a maelstrom of flame and twisted steel. My consciousness wavered. I dimly registered an inhuman roar from somewhere nearby. A figure loomed through the smoke, whether infected or just a hallucination, I couldn't tell. My lungs burned. Every breath was agony. The explosions continued in the distance, the city's final hour. In that haze, I sensed movement. A shape crawled over debris, reaching for me. Abby or something else. A rasping sound, half my name, half a monstrous snarl. My eyes struggled to focus, black spots dancing. Then, as I teetered on the edge of unconsciousness, I realized the shape had lifeless eyes, jaws parted in ravenous hunger. It wasn't Abby. I tried to lift the soldier's pistol, but my arm wouldn't respond. The last shred of strength drained from me, pinned by twisted metal. The infected loomed closer, each breath a wet, guttural hiss. My heart hammered. Fear spiked, primal and all-consuming. Somewhere above, a helicopter spotlight flickered through the choking smoke, maybe the same one that tried to rescue us, or another. I heard the distant call of a muffled voice. Then more rubble collapsed, blocking out the light. The final explosion rattled the stadium. Flames roared. The infected hissed, leaning forward. My vision blurred, the blackness overtaking me. The city was lost, the dawn a flaming graveyard. My final conscious thought was a desperate, silent plea. Abby, if you're alive, run. Please run. Darkness swallowed me, and I have no idea if I woke up again. That's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed the video, subscribing to my channel would help me out more than you can imagine. I appreciate you, and I'll see you soon.